about to start.
Yeah. So he's with DXE. He knows even more about what's going on. Actually,
Maybe. I tried to go over there.
Protest. Did you read about that? Yeah. No. Curtis, you should talk about the civil case too, unless it's encroaching on.
Hey guys, Carla Cabral, Direct Action Everywhere here. Give a minute for people to show up for this live stream. Thank you guys for joining us. Curtis is about to start.
All right, everybody. Thank you for attending this talk here. My name is Curtis. I'm an organizer with Direct Action Everywhere, based in the Bay Area, Berkeley to be exact, SF Bay Area. And I'm here with two other activists, organizers with Direct Action Everywhere. The co-founder here, Wayne Hsiung, and longtime organizer Paul Darwin Picklesimer. And one of the big reasons that, well, I'll first start with what and who Direct Action Everywhere is. Direct Action Everywhere is a grassroots animal rights network. And we are most known, well, at least in the beginning, for our kind of like disruptive tactics to get the issue of animal rights on the table. It has since evolved into a lot more, as of recently, legal battles, which is the main reason why we're here. Wayne and Paul, back in 2017, did an investigation into a Smithfield Foods-owned factory farm called Circle 4 Farms. It has since changed names, but a lot of people still call it Circle 4 Farms. It is the largest pig factory farm in the country. It spans almost 30 miles from end to end. It's in Beaver County. It's still called Circle 4. It's owned by Smithfield WH Group. Wayne and Paul are facing a felony prosecution as a result of this investigation that they did in 2017. And the trial is happening next month in Washington County. The trial was supposed to be this weekend, which is why a lot of our organization was here, because people still had made plans to be here. But not too long ago, the judge ruled that he couldn't really get a fair jury, a fair trial in Beaver County, because a lot of people in Beaver County either had strong connections with the police, or they had themselves work, or had friends and family that worked in the farm, because so many people are employed by this factory farm and rely on it for economic purposes. So we are having this little forum here with Wayne and Paul. I'm kind of moderating, and I think the first question is that we can ask, and we'll ask some questions that the judge is not allowing to be present in the trial. The judge has recently ruled that they're not allowed to show footage from inside of the farm. They're not allowed to really talk about animal cruelty. A lot of this stuff is being left out, but I will let them get into that. So let's start back in 2017. Why Smithfield Foods? Why this facility? Why this target? Why did you decide that this farm in the Utah desert is what we're gonna go after and what we're gonna try to expose?
Thank you, everybody, for sharing.
Yeah, so Paul, this was probably your fourth investigation, maybe? What do you remember?
Something like that. So
it was getting to the point where I was thinking, Paul's basically at a position where he was ready to lead, because Paul was just one of the best people I ever worked with in terms of investigations. His ability to learn, spatial awareness, camera work. Paul's one of the best camera people we've ever had, and you learned really quickly. And I think by this point, we were getting ready to basically let you kind of take on projects. But this is honestly kind of one of my last big investigations. I've been going into farms and slaughterhouses for, since 2007. 2007 was the first time I walked into a slaughterhouse, and when I first walked in, it was actually a Chicago slaughterhouse, Chipetteville and Lamb, I think it's 35th and Pershing. The thing that struck me about it was just how easy it was. And this is like a fairly small slaughterhouse, like a genuine kind of mom and pop facility that was slaughtering like a few hundred lambs and calves a week. It was like a lamb and baby cow slaughterhouse. And even there, it was just like I walked in the middle of the night, and I think a worker even saw me, and they just said, whatever, I don't care. Like, this place is a mess. There's chaos and cruelty and blood and chemicals everywhere. It's just not particularly interesting to me that there's random Chinese dude walking around in here, which was surprising to me. So, but Smithfield Foods is a different ballgame. Smithfield is the largest pork production company in the world. It is part of a global conglomerate. owned by one of the richest men in the world, Wan Lan, whose company WH Group slaughters hundreds of millions of pigs across the entire world. And the central reason we wanted to come here was not just because of its size and systemic influence. Smithfield provides about 1/3 of the pork in the nation to consumers, but because of a specific promise the company had made. So back in January 2007, their CEO at the time, I think it was Larry Pope, made an announcement that they were going to do something bold and incredible for the animals. In particular, they're going to get rid of these horrible devices called gestation crates, which have been described by Ian Duncan, an animal welfare scientist, as the cruelest form of torment that humankind has ever invented. And these mother pigs who would normally want to live in, hundreds of thousands of square feet, just walking around and enjoying life and digging, are living in 2-foot by 7-foot cages that the only way to describe them is like metal coffins. Metal coffins for a living being to live for 5, 6, 7 years of their life, unable to move even 1 foot forward or 1 foot back, because it's more convenient and efficient to raise mother pigs in that state. So we had heard through the grapevine from people whose family members worked at Smithfield Foods that they were continuing to use gestation crates, despite promising that they had done away with them. We'd also looked at satellite imagery of the facility. It was just very low tech, Google imagery. Like if you look at Google Maps, there's a little date on the image, and it gets updated every now and then when Google Maps and their satellite contractors take another image of the particular site. So for the course of many years, starting in I think like 2014 or 2015, I knew about this facility because it's the largest pig farm in the nation, 1.2 million pigs every year. And we'd just be looking at the Google Maps imagery to see, is anything changing? Because when you transition a facility from gestation crates to what's called group housing, Smithfield was promising a $600 million investment. It's a huge project. That's like bigger than a football stadium. Like football stadiums cost like 200 million, 300 million. So they're saying, we're going to spend like 3 times that amount changing all of our facilities. And you'd expect to see some change at the single largest pig farm in their entire supply chain. And month after month after month, week after week, even year after year, we go back to those satellite images and see that not a damn thing had changed. I didn't even see a single bulldozer, not even a shovel, a hole being done over the course of that 2-year time period. And so when that deadline hit, January 2017, we said, we've got to go inside. Because in the state of Utah, the Utah state legislature, just a couple of years prior, had passed what's called an ag-gag law, criminalizing the act of taking a photograph inside of a factory farm. All the traditional nonprofit organizations had stopped doing investigations. All the workers themselves, who historically had been a great source for whistleblowing footage inside factory farms, all of them were terrified because they know if I just take a photograph of criminal conduct, even if it's criminal conduct unfolding in my company, I could end up in jail. And people have been charged with these sorts of crimes for merely taking photographs. There's a member of your community here in Utah, Amy Meyer, who was charged for merely standing on a public street, taking photographs of a farm worker abusing a downed cow. So when you're in a state like that, not many people are going to do investigations. And again, this is a very systemically important farm. 1.2 million pigs, the single largest pig farm at the largest pork production company in the world. We decided somebody has to take a look inside. And when we took a look inside, what do you think we found? Row after row after row of thousands and thousands of mother pigs and gestation crates.
Hey everybody,
Yeah,
thank you for
thanks,
joining.
Wayne. I think that's a good transition into what exactly you found inside that farm. And I know that both of you had cameras, but I think Paul, you took a lot of that video and a lot of those photos. So do you want to talk a little bit about what you saw in there and the concerns that you had?
Yeah, thanks, Curtis. And good point, Wayne, about the ag laws. I think it's always smart if we're going to be advocating for somebody, advocating a cause, whatever it is, whether it's animal rights or any social justice issue, that it's really important to think about the victims themselves in particular, and how things can be helped from their perspective. But it's also important to think about your adversaries, so like the industry. So when these different states and these industries in these different states are spending all this money to lobby and to get these ag laws passed, it's for a very specific reason, because they don't want you to see this exact footage that we're talking about. So that's a cue for us to say, oh, you don't want us to see it? Well, guess what? Like, from now on, ag law means we're coming and people are going to see it. So you want to just sort of push back against what they're trying to do in those cases. And yeah, you walk in, and I mean, I hope a lot of y'all have seen it, and it's it's horrific. You know, like we just watched inside there some of the footage, and one pig in particular, I teared up in there. I do every time I watch it, and it's this poor pig. She's in what's called a finishing barn, and that's where they go for like the majority of their life. After they reach a certain weight, they go there to put on the rest of their weight. And in the beginning, you know, they're still, you know, they're always babies. They're going to be out of there by the time they're 6 months old on their trip to the slaughterhouse. But they're so tiny when they get in there, and then they just keep growing and growing and growing. Their body weight becomes harder and harder to support for their legs. All it takes is one injury. Imagine if you twist your ankle, you're going to favor that ankle for a few days or a few weeks until it's better to hold your weight. But you're going to be okay. You grab a crutch if you need to. But if you're a pig and you twist your ankle, you've got, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pounds to support, and you're not going to be able to. And so this pig, her front legs were not able to support her body anymore. And so they took her out of the pig area and put her in the hallway, I call it a hallway, it's just an area between all the different cages. And there's no access to food or water in there. There's just shit everywhere, and she's just got her hind legs up, standing, trying to stand, but her front legs aren't cooperating. So she's just laying there, defeated, with her face in a pile of everyone else's shit. And that shit is probably all that she has to even stay hydrated. She's got to eat that just so she doesn't, you know, completely dehydrate and die. And in the video, you see, you know, the other pigs just kind of coming up to her to comfort her a little bit and see how she's doing, and you can see that they're sharing emotions. And so emotions is one of the things that you see. I've said it before, when I walk in, and I'm just like a white guy, a white person, non-binary, and I look at the pig's eyes, and I just see this like white skin and these blue eyes, and they just remind me of my grandpa. And they just have a lot of soul in their eyes, and like to zoom in on their eyeball, it just looks just like my grandpa's eyeball. And I think about him, and I think about like, man, like, they're not different from my grandpa, you know, in any of the ways that matter. And so you're just like, wow, all these persons lined up as far as the eye can see. The first facility we went to, like on one side was 100% gestation crates for as far as the eye can see. The other side had like the group housing where they would go before they were impregnated in the small amount of time that they're not in the gestation crates. And both of them suck. Like on the gestation crates, obviously they're trapped. They're chewing at the bars, trying to get out, or they're chewing because they're just losing it, and that's just how they cope. And on the group housing side, they're all covered in scabs and cuts because they'll fight with each other sometimes, or, you know, try to get food, and pigs are just like any of us. Some of us are pretty kind to one another, some of us are bullies. And it's a scary thing if you're one of the ones getting bullied, and just sorrow. And it's not just what you see, it's what you hear. So you definitely hear these horrible sounds, these horrible screaming. It's hard to do anything. It was the first time we had used our virtual reality camera setup ourselves. So it's just like, you're like thankful that you can just set this VR camera up, knowing that the industry always tells us, oh, y'all just point the cameras at what you want people to see. So now with the virtual reality, we're like, no, put on this headset, do a 360, look around any direction you want to look, and you're going to see the same thing: misery, suffering, filth, injury, death, disease, all the worst things you can imagine just under one roof.
Cool, thanks, Paul. I know that the intention of this investigation was really just that. You all just wanted to go in and just kind of show, the people of Utah, the country, the world, what was going on in this farm. But there are two individuals in particular, Lily and Lizzie, two piglets that were actually rescued by the both of you and others that were there. Can you talk a little bit about, a little bit more about your intentions and why Lily and Lizzie, and kind of a little bit about their story?
So when we do investigations, we never have the specific intent to take anybody out. We're there primarily to document, as you put it. But we also know that there are animals that, if they're left behind, are going to end up in a dumpster. That the way they're going to die is beyond imagination awful. I'm talking about day after day of slow starvation. I'm talking about animals being eaten alive, which we've seen happen. And you see it most often probably in poultry farms, but you will occasionally see, pigs literally being consumed by other pigs. My buddy Matt documented some of this happening, and I think you were actually part of the investigation at a pig farm in Iowa where there was a carcass that pigs were just feasting on. And as an act of mercy, when there's an animal that's so defeated, so broken, that inevitably she's going to die, and it's going to be a sad and terrible way to die, we try to give them some help. That's it. And this is important for a number of reasons, not just because this individual being, just like a dog, you find distressed or injured or dying, and has an interest in life and an interest in not suffering. And all of us love these stories of a dog that gets back on her feet, or any animal, human being who's sick and suffering, who gets back on her feet. But because it symbolically shows us how we should treat all of them. Right? What we do for this one is what we should do for the world. And there's a famous quote, I think it's usually associated with Joseph Stalin, unfortunately, but it's very true, which is 1 death, or 1 million deaths is a statistic, 1 death is going to pull at somebody's heartstrings. 1 death is a tragedy. And so it's a mechanism for us to just showcase that there's something really awful happening. That's not just this systemic conceptual evil, but that's really real and concrete and individualized in a way that you or I, or when you think about like my dog suffering, or my child suffering, you can really make it concrete. And I think that's kind of what we try to do, and I think when we do these projects well, we succeed at doing, when we save one of the animals' lives.
So, to me, one of the most interesting wrinkles in all of this, this investigation, this rescue, this trial, is what the FBI did in response to this. There was an article that came out from the New York Times, which then, I believe that was when all of this really started to get rolling, and the FBI got involved. Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about what the FBI did and how it came to that?
Yeah, thanks, Curtis. There's no way to know exactly what phone calls were made by who, but at some point, after this massive factory farm of the world's largest killer of pigs, WH Group, which owns Smithfield Foods, does billions and billions, I think 27 billion in revenue last year. I'm not sure what the profit was. They said that they lost out on $100 worth of quote-unquote property, which are these 2 piglets. And I've said before, I challenge any of you to be robbed in your life, to have someone steal something from you. Jeremy, who organizes this conference with UARC and their team, was just telling me the other day, he entered a Magic the Gathering tournament, and he won what he thought was a whole year of free entry to all the tournaments. And he found out later that there was no fine print, but they said, oh, we didn't mean the pre-release parties, which is the ones that he really wanted to go to, which is a value of $1,000 potentially. Now, he lost out on that money. And if he calls the FBI and says, hey, this Magic the Gathering organization just stole $1,000 worth of product from me, they're going to hang up on him. He's not going to even be able to get on the phone with them. But when one of the most powerful industries, one of the most powerful companies in the state of Utah and frankly in the world calls the FBI and says, hey, someone stole $100 of our property, we don't care about the $100 whatsoever, but we don't want them showing this footage to the New York Times and others, then the FBI got involved and went on a multi-state pig hunt, essentially. They went to a sanctuary here in Utah with a search warrant, guns drawn. I've seen the body cam footage, and it's horrific. It is FBI agents with guns approaching sanctuary volunteers, putting the screws to them, telling them, you need to tell us everything you know right now. They don't have a lawyer. Tell us everything you know, or else you're going to be complicit in this crime. Like scaring the crap out of these people, and making them talk without an attorney. And it's just disgusting. And then they went to Colorado and did the same thing. And there they found 2 piglets who they thought fit the description of the potential piglets. And they had, in their search warrant, the ability to extract their flesh for the purpose of DNA testing to determine that they were, in fact, or were not the piglets in question, or had the same DNA that all the Smithfield pigs do. And they put a pole with a wire around the neck of one of the pigs screaming bloody murder. The sanctuary volunteers and operators, some of the most empathetic, amazing people on the planet, subjected to seeing their family with a pole stuck to their neck while they took tin snips, essentially, giant scissors, and literally cut off a chunk of the pig's ears. And the agents themselves couldn't even couldn't even find it themselves to do the second pig. They were just kind of like, fuck this. We're not like, this is not what we're paid for. I imagine most of those agents got involved thinking I want to be taking down child trafficking rings or doing something that's actually helpful instead of chasing down these 2 piglets at a sanctuary and mutilating them in front of other animals and the caretakers. So it's just absolutely disgusting. And it just goes to show the resources. You know, we have laws, and you know, these are the laws of the colonizers. And some of them could be for good things. I don't want people to drive drunk on the highway, you know? And I want to keep everybody safe from that kind of thing. But a lot of these laws, the only people who can actually have them exerted and have the laws to quote-unquote protect them are the individuals or the institutions that have the most resources, the most connections, the most money. And it's just like, screw everybody else. And, you know, this is an example of that.
I just want to say something about WH Group, which is because a lot of people probably have never heard of WH Group. You might not have heard of Smithfield. You probably know Costco, which is where a lot of this meat is being sold, Walmart, Costco. But WH Group is a company in China that has a long history of food safety scandals back in China, right? And it was the single largest acquisition of an American company by a Chinese company. And they're the ones who are controlling Smithfield. So it's not just that the FBI and the government are doing all these corrupt things. They're doing corrupt things on behest of a Chinese corporation that is involved in all the scandal in its home country. So one example is, 15 years ago or so, WH Group was implicated in a scandal where they were feeding the pigs clenbuterol. So Curtis is a track athlete. Do you know about clenbuterol? Do track athletes use this? Good. It's a performance-enhancing drug. It's banned. You can't use it because it makes you grow big and fast and muscular really quickly, right? Which is great for athletes. It's also great for pig farmers who want to feed their pigs drugs. And there actually have been Olympic-level athletes who, after eating pork, test positive for steroids because they eat pork from a place like Smithfield Foods, right? So this is who not only are we trusting our food system to, we're trusting our law enforcement to. And I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you should be concerned that the Chinese government, which financed this acquisition to the tune of something like $6 billion, the Chinese government is controlling our system of law enforcement here in the United States. That's scary.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. And there was last year during the Olympics, there was an Olympic level runner, Shelby Houlihan. She was a miler, but she tested positive for something, and her defense was a bad burrito or something. And people, it could have been, but that was, so that's definitely a thing. So let's get to it's 2:22. We've got an hour, right? Yeah, so now I want to give like at least 15 minutes for Q&A. So if you've got some questions, we do want to field questions from people in the audience here. So let's fast forward to the trial. So the trial's coming up in a month, but this whole thing and this investigation was 5 years ago. So why on earth has this thing taken so long? What is going on? What has been going on between the investigation and the trial? And I know there's been multiple judges, and there's been all of these various rulings. So can you give us a little bit of history about some of the proceedings that have gotten us to where we are now?
Yeah, this shouldn't take too long to answer, but it's just been sort of one thing after another. The judges, the first judge, left the case, and because of they retired, a conflict of interest. Okay.
It was Judge Barnes. Judge Barnes left the case because one out of 4 workers in the county of Beaver are employed by Smithfield Foods, and I think his daughter's husband worked for Circle 4.
Thanks. And then the second one, we didn't get an explanation. Yeah, so inexplicably, the second judge just left the case as well. We never learned about that. On top of that, COVID happened, and that put a lot of things on the back burner. And then between now and then, we've really had to fight at every corner. Just a big shout out to our legal team, and that whether it be our attorneys of record or other people helping out within our network. They've really done a good job of finding a lot of things that were important to challenge. We've had a lot of hearings on a lot of different motions, some granted, some not granted, some pretty egregious. I mean, the biggest one that stands out is we are the only case, I think, definitely I've ever heard of. Can you imagine a case where you're on trial for a quote-unquote burglary, and there's video evidence showing the alleged burglary, and the jury is not allowed to see that? So it just blows my mind that if you want to have a jury and have them be informed of the situation, you could just show them. We have multiple camera angles of everything that happened, and we could say, hey, here's exactly what happened. Why don't you use that in your decision whether to convict us or not? And the jury is being denied that option because the prosecutors are arguing that it's prejudicial to show the jury how terrible the circumstances are because it could cloud their judgment in whether or not they should convict us. Like, it would make them less likely to convict us if they saw the actual footage because the company itself is such a villain in the situation. And I don't care. To me, that's like, you can argue that all you want. If I'm a juror, I want to see it. Okay, I trust myself to watch something and decide for myself, how it fits in with the law and my own character, because that's literally a factor too. But yeah, it's been some kind of one thing after another. It's just an educational experience to show how long these things can play out sometimes. But it's okay. We've stood strong throughout all of it, and we've used the opportunity to get a lot of press and a lot of eyes on it. And that's one thing about this case, or open rescue cases in general. Some people, like, for one thing, it takes a lot of privilege to do what we do. I have U.S. citizenship. I don't have a certain job or I have a certain license that can be revoked if I commit a crime. I have a support group of people and friends who would back me up if I'm facing something like I'm facing now, and that's rare. Not everyone has that. So to do this, it takes a certain level of privilege, and if you can use that, you can use that. You don't need privilege to save someone's life, or certain privileges. There are dogs and cats who are facing the death penalty every day just for being homeless. Any of us, or a lot of us, can go and foster someone, or adopt someone, or help them get adopted, and their lives are just as valuable as Lily and Lizzie's, who are living their best life on a sanctuary. You can also do research, you can do a million different things, but the one value of doing this is that we do get to share their story, and because we're open about it and public about it, and it's an interesting story, millions and millions of people have either read about this in the New York Times when it originally happened, the Washington Post when it originally happened, and all the protests and actions we've done since then in between. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Glenn Newell wrote an article that was, at the time, his most or second most popular article ever. It reached so many different people all over different spectrums. It went outside of our movement into the homes of everybody else. And there's value in that, because this footage, if there's not somebody going to trial for it sometimes, it's hard to get it in front of people's faces. But since we are defendants, when we press release to the media about a protest, it's like, yeah, there's like people at a risk of going to prison, and it becomes a little more newsworthy. So you can use that situation to elevate the whole cause.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think to me, the central reason this case has taken so long is because the state, and even more importantly, the industry, are afraid to litigate the case. They've filed so many unprecedented motions to deny us access to evidence, to prevent us from showing video footage of the crime. In all my years of legal practice, and every single lawyer I've talked to, including lawyers who have decades of experience, no one I've talked to has ever heard of a case where you were not allowed to play the video of a crime at the trial. It's unheard of. Another thing that happened very recently is also very unheard of. So this might seem like a small thing, but it's a big thing from a legal perspective. The judge just ruled that the jury in our case will be anonymous. And legal grounds for granting an anonymous jury are a threat of intimidation or harassment against jurors. Now, the reason this is interesting is because I actually asked, again, all my criminal defense law professors and lawyer friends, and I have a lot of them because I'm a former law professor, I've been in the law 20 years or so. Again, not a single one of my friends, my coworkers, my colleagues at Northwestern, at the University of Chicago, law schools, could think of a single case they're aware of where this has ever occurred. They'd heard of cases like this, right? And the only cases we could find on the record were things like this that unfolded were cases involving organized crime murdering or potentially murdering witnesses. But the legal basis was not just on the face in the abstract way, very, very strange and bizarre, and statistically strange and bizarre. The stated reasons that are provided in the hearing were extremely strange and bizarre. And the three things the judge cited and the prosecution cited in saying, we can't allow anyone to know who these jurors are, because in the United States, we have public trials. These are not kangaroo courts where you don't know the name of the judge or the jury or the prosecutor. They don't happen on a cover of night in some basement where no one can see what's happening. In the United States, our Constitution believes in a public system of justice, because we know if you could throw someone in a cage or even kill them, when the state has the authority to literally murder you,
it better be transparent. We better know exactly what's happening. Or it could happen to you. If not for a stroke of fate, it could happen to you too. This is what the founders said in 1776. We don't want these sham trials that are happening in darkness. Everything's got to be in public. But the three specific pieces of evidence cited by the judge to justify this extraordinary maneuver that the prosecution was seeking of a secret jury were: one, a friend of ours and a member of our legal team, John Fromeyer, simply requesting a list of jurors. That's it. All he did was make a request. He didn't contact them. He didn't harass them. He just requested, of the clerk of the court, can I see the list of jurors? Which should be our legal right, for the record. But all he did was request. That was data point number one. The judge was concerned that John Fromeyer requested a list of jurors. Number two was that Paul and I, because we're part of an organization with a communications director, that reached out to the court to ask for media access. Ask, can we publish what's happening at trial? That's it. Not saying we're going to attack jurors, not saying we're going to intimidate jurors, not saying anything violent at all, just making a media request, which again, happens in court cases across the country. Many of you have probably seen court cases, like Johnny Depp's court case, or the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, where there's media everywhere. And media makes requests. In this case, it happened to be an animal rights activist, but that's all they did. They just made a media request. And the third thing he said was a separate organization, the Utah Animal Rights Coalition, which is actually organizing this Veg Fest, so we can blame this Veg Fest for us. They sent a leaflet, again, just an educational leaflet describing what happens to animals in factory farms to the residents of Beaver County. These are the three data points to justify an unprecedented secret jury in our case. And this not only takes up a huge amount of time, it shows the biases, because on some level, I just don't blame the prosecution in the state for doing this, because I think in their minds, they really do see this act of compassion that we undertook, these photographs that we took inside this factory farm, as very aggressive actions, because we live in this weird polarized world where people on different sides just can't perceive the world the way it actually is. We just see our enemies and see everything they're doing as much more insidious and evil and even violent than it actually is. But I think they legitimately do see us as doing things that we are not actually doing. They see us as engaging in violence when we do something as simple as leaflet on a public sidewalk, which Curtis was charged for just a couple weeks ago, for exercising his constitutional right to stand on a public sidewalk and have conversations with people. He was charged with disorderly conduct and told that he was a threat to Beaver County. So this is the reason the case has taken so long, but it is also the reason the prosecution and the industry are very scared of taking this court, because they know if they don't make these extraordinary efforts to suggest that we're violent people, deny us access to evidence that we otherwise should be able to present, then the facts will come out and people will see that taking a pig to the vet is not a crime.
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, you mentioned that incident in Beaver County. I'll talk real quickly about that. This happened about a month and a half ago. There was a small group of us that went to Beaver County just to talk to residents about Smithfield Foods, their activities, just kind of get a vibe of how the community was feeling about it, and also, potentially raise awareness about the trial. Actually made some friends, try to make some friends. Try to see if anybody wanted to talk on record about things that were happening in the county. Potentially find some whistleblowers, some people that might want to talk about what's going on inside these farms. And it was Pioneer Day. It was at a Pioneer Day festival in Beaver County. There was lots of people out and about, so that was one of the reasons why we went there. And almost from the get-go, we were facing problems. We tried to set up a tent, which I had asked about a month prior. I called some of the organizers for this festival in Beaver County and said, "Hey, I'm with Direct Action Everywhere. I'm with Utah, and they're also with Utah Animal Rights Coalition, and we want to set up a booth there." And these people on the phone, they said, "Yeah, no problem." I was like, "Do I need to pay anything? Do I need to file any permit? Is there anybody else I need to talk to?" "No, just show up and set up a tent where you can find it." Okay. As soon as we get there, someone comes over to us and said, "Y'all can't be here. You can't be here. Y'all aren't supposed to be here." And then a cop came over and said, "Yeah, this is public property. You're not supposed to be here." I said, "All right, where can we set up our tent? Where can we leaflet? Where can we talk to people?" They put us over on the sidewalk. We set up a table there, but we did kind of we were walking around just leafleting, asking people some questions about Smithfield. About 2 hours after that, the cops approached me and they told me that I needed to leave and that people were complaining to them and all this and that. Long story short, they ended up charging me with disorderly conduct, and I did nothing other than was just leafleting on the sidewalk. And this just goes to show you, how embedded this industry is with the community there. And but I did have some good conversations with people, and it wasn't all bad. There was also a video by a popular police interaction YouTube channel that published this interaction, and it has over 1 million views. And I think some of the comments are pretty funny. There's quite a few like, "Oh, I hate these damn animal rights. I hate that this video makes me side with these damn tree-hugging hippies." Because these people are not like generally, into animal rights or supportive of animal rights, but they hold free speech and the First Amendment sacred, and realize that, yeah, these cops are wrong, and even though I don't agree with this guy, he does have a right to, talk on public property. So that's, another interesting wrinkle in all of this. And the judge actually cited it in one of the pretrial motions right when, one of the good things is that this is now changed to St. George. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that happened?
Well, maybe you should talk about it, because you made it happen, my friend.
I don't think that's
No, I think it was 100%. It was because you didn't share kind of the most interesting detail from your interaction, which is Allie, who's right here, was sitting at a table, and the elected sheriff, like literally the person who was elected to be the enforcer of the Constitution in Beaver County. When you're an officer, especially if you're an elected officer, and you're a law enforcement officer, your first duty is the Constitution of the United States. They swear, often on a Bible, that I'll defend the Constitution of the United States. And we all know the Constitution, the first right in the Constitution is the freedom of speech right. It's like the most important right. And in fact, back when the Founding Fathers wrote the Bill of Rights, the most important expression of free speech was leafleting on a public sidewalk, because they didn't have the internet and Twitter in 1776. The only way for you to speak was to get out there on a public sidewalk and hand out your leaflets. So in First Amendment law, we call this the traditional public forum, the classic, iconic First Amendment case where you have to give people the right to speak. And for merely exercising this right, Curtis and Allie, who was sitting at a table, just peacefully, not even going out and reaching out to other people, just letting people come to you and talk to them. The sheriff of the county, who's supposed to be defending her right to free speech, comes to her and says, "You are going to be killed." The sheriff, who's supposed to be defending her right, says, "You are going to be killed." This is repeated by other officers. And they made clear that not only are you going to be killed, we're not going to do anything about it. We don't care. In fact, we're a little annoyed that you're facing threats and you're getting killed. And one of the most bizarre things about this entire experience is we presented this to the judge, which is why the judge, begrudgingly, he never actually conceded that we actually face any sort of prejudice or bias or even violent threats, even though we actually had concrete evidence. It wasn't people sending us leaflets or making media requests of us. It was actually people saying, "You're going to be killed," including law enforcement in that county. But after we presented this evidence, including video footage that Curtis and Allie shot, showing officers threatening to kill people, or not threatening to kill people, passing on death threats and saying, kind of implicitly suggesting we're supportive of this, we want you to die. He turns around and says, "You are the violent people." It's like, wait, Your Honor, we just got threatened with death, and people are trying to murder us, or at least they're saying they're going to murder us, and now you're saying we're a great danger to intimidate and harass and potentially engage in violent acts against jurors. And again, I don't think it's actual manipulation or deception on the part of the state or the court. I think it's just genuinely this fear that we all have to overcome, the fear of the new, the fear of the different. And one of the great things about this country from the day it was founded was we said, we're not going to be the sort of country that denies people the right to be a part of this country just because they have a different skin color. Now, the reality is we did a lot of terrible things starting in 1776, including banning people of my skin color from this country. That happened in 1882, 100 years later. But still, the ideal was, I don't care what your religion is, I don't care what your race is, I don't care what color shoes you wear. This is a country that's for everybody, for everybody. What's happening across the country right now, especially in places like Beaver County, when there are these very hotly contested issues, is you no longer believe in that principle. And we got to get back to that. We got to believe in our community being a community for everyone, and even more. And this is why I really think everyone in this country should be able to get behind the animal rights movement. We have to believe that this planet is for everyone. I don't care if you're black or white, you're Muslim, you're Jewish, you're Christian. I don't care if you're a dog or a cat, a polar bear, or a rat. This planet is for everybody. Everybody deserves the right to live a good life. And this is one of the principles this country was founded upon.
So let's fight for it and make it real.
Great, thanks, Wayne. So this trial is happening on October 3rd, and there's probably a lot of people here that are wondering, well, I'm just one person, like, what can I do to help? So why don't you all talk a little bit about what people can do to help that are here, that live here or don't live here, and also ways that they might be able to get involved.
Thanks, Curtis. Well, I mean, one thing is that dnc.io/Utah, is that where they should go if they want Utah sign up? That's if you want to come up and bring your body to Washington County and be outside the courtrooms in the mornings. I think what's going to happen is that people are going to be on the sidewalks, exercising their First Amendment right, not trying to intimidate anybody, but trying to show support for a cause, for individuals who are facing prosecution, and for individuals who are facing far worse than we can ever imagine on these factory farms. You can be there and you can stand outside and help the media show that, like, hey, this is an issue that a lot of people care about, and that's great. Afterwards, people will then, I think, go to a different building to try to watch the trial on the WebEx. Of course, in line with everything else, the judge is like, no one can come into the trial. It's really messed up, but that's one thing. But the other thing is that don't focus on us too much. Like we in particular, we're going to have a lot of support. There are people who are animal rights activists in prisons who don't have a strong support network, who've stuck out tough years, fairly isolated without a lot of access to support. That's not going to be us. So we would love to get any kind of letters and support while we're in there, just to the extent that it doesn't sacrifice what y'all are just doing. By being here today, by supporting UARC, coming to these veg fests, supporting vendors, small businesses, trying to show that there's a way to feed each other in food systems that don't involve exploiting animals. Organize yourself, whether it's a Direct Action Everywhere type group like Aaron organizes in SLC, or whether it's an educational group that's like the Glass Walls experience that was last night with York, or you're volunteering at Sage Mountain, and you're donating to these sanctuaries. There's just so many things you can do. So honestly, don't focus too much on us. Keep up with our case if you're interested in it. When you see articles about it, share with other people. Help more people see this. Help people in your lives, your loved ones, your friends and family. And they're like, hey, this is something about me. You should know. I'm not okay with what's happening to these animals. And I want to. It's a political issue, and I want to be political about it. And I want to talk about it. So be that person, and just be your best selves. Do your thing. Keep us in mind. But yeah, literally show up and support if you want to. And otherwise, keep up with it online. And the more people that we can get to see it, the better.
I'll just add, one of the reasons I think it's really important for all of you, and I really do mean all of you, to be involved in whatever capacity you can, is the reality is they're not actually trying to stop me and Paul in this court case. While we're the ones facing prison time, they're not actually interested in stopping us. They're trying to stop you.
Yes.
They're trying to characterize you as weird, extremist, radical, maybe even violent people. And Curtis saw this firsthand. Allie saw this firsthand. Right? That this isn't actually about the two of us. It's not even about the two piglets we rescued. It's about a narrative about the world that they know is a narrative that is inspiring people to change. A narrative of compassion, not cruelty. A narrative of truth, not deception. And Smithfield and Costco and these companies have enormous amount of money to lose if this narrative actually wins out. And the people who are delivering this narrative, we're not just delivering this narrative, you are this narrative. The people at this Veg Fest are the folks embodying the narrative of a more compassionate, sustainable world for all living beings on this earth. These companies have billions of dollars at stake, and they know they need to stop you. They will stop you by characterizing us as violent, radical extremists at this trial. They will try and stop us by intimidating other activists from doing these sorts of things or saying these sorts of things, like Curtis. After an experience like that, if not for the fact that you had a great legal team behind you, you might be sitting in a jail or just scared and say, hell no, I'm not doing that again. I don't want to face criminal charges for talking about animals. That's ridiculous. Right? But Curtis has support. He has strength. But the reason all of us are able to do this is because there's a lot of people who speak out. So when the time comes, and this is coming in less than a month, and we already have big media outlets, documentary companies, plenty to come out, the people whose voice needs to be heard isn't even just us or our lawyers. It's got to be you. It's got to be you on Twitter and Facebook. It's got to be you on Instagram. It's got to be you in your communities, in your families, at Thanksgiving dinner. If your parents want to serve pork at Thanksgiving or Christmas, send them the video of Circle 4, and show them this is what I believe in. This is what people are literally being imprisoned for. And you have to ask yourself, is this the narrative you believe in? And I think what you'll find is most people, when they see pigs literally wasting away and rotting to death inside a massive factory farm, they will say, that's not the narrative I believe in. The narrative I believe in is one of compassion. But it's up to you, not us.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Paul. We've got about 15 minutes left, so I would love to open this up to Q&A. And what I'll do is I'll run up and I'll get the question and then I'll repeat it through here so everybody can hear it.
How many people are being charged on the October 3rd trial? Okay. What are the charges, and what does the legal team think that the chances are of not being convicted?
I did. So there are 2 people facing trial.
Sorry, what was your name, sir? Pete. Pete asked a question here. He asked, how many people are facing charges in this trial? What exactly are the charges? And what does our legal team think that our percentage of a good outcome is?
Yeah, so I think I'll be brief on this. There are 2 people being charged, myself and Paul. There were 3 other co-defendants who pled out of the case under terms that were, frankly, unconstitutional. The main term was they could not criticize Smithfield for 3 years, and in exchange they were not incarcerated or imprisoned. The specific charges against us are burglary and theft for removing these 2 piglets. And in terms of the prospects for victory, I mean, it's hard to make specific estimates. I don't even know if I want to make a specific estimates. I will say the odds of winning a court of law are getting harder and harder every day because of the court rulings, whether it's the anonymous jury, which will certainly prejudice the jury against us. They'll think from day one, why is no one allowed to say our name in court? And it's because the court and the prosecution are characterizing us as dangerous people. And it's going to be hard for a juror to make an objective decision when from day one they're told, these people are so dangerous, we cannot even let them know what your name is, right? So when you're not allowed to play the video of the crime, when you're not allowed to say why you were there and your motive for being there, when you're not even allowed to know the name of the jurors in the courtroom, and we're in, a legal system that feels like the mid-16th century France, where they're having these secret executions, I mean, the odds are going to be hard for us. But the key thing is, and I just said this, the real trial that's unfolding isn't the trial that's happening in the courtroom. It's a trial of the court of public opinion, because there's going to be so much discussion of animals and animal abuse and free speech as a result of this case. We will win or lose depending on what happens outside of the courtroom, not what happens inside that trial.
So I know this guy here. This is Aaron from Salt Lake City. So his question was, during the actual investigation, what were some things that you could have done better? Or maybe you wish you would have done better, or things you wish you would have did? I'll give it to Paul.
No, honestly, not a lot comes to mind. I'm pretty proud of the work that we did. I know it's could land us in prison, but I thought that the team did a great job of remaining composed. This is no matter what we're doing in life, if it's for a good cause, we should really put our all into it and try to do our best. And then, exactly like you said, look back. What could we do better? I got to give us a pretty high score. I thought we functioned pretty well. I thought it was not hard to capture lots of damning footage because everywhere you looked it was. We introduced new technology into our investigations. That helped the press be interested. The article that the New York Times ran was not solely based on what we found, but it was sort of framed as the animal rights movement as a new technology, virtual reality. And I think that went really well. I felt supported throughout all of it. I think our team felt good. Like Wayne mentioned, it wasn't the intention, but as it played out, 2 individuals who would have been killed in a matter of days if they didn't starve to death. If by some miraculous circumstances they, weren't, then they had 6 months of hell and a trip to the slaughterhouse ahead of them. Instead, those 2 individuals have had a better life than maybe any of us, because they spend a lot of time in the mud, in the sunshine, surrounded by love and eating and crapping and making friends, just a good life. So I thought it was great. There's you'll see some of the footage, there's blinking, and that's always bothered me, because when you use certain lights with certain cameras at certain frame rates, it produces a flicker effect, and our footage has that flicker effect a lot. It's a small thing, but it's the kind of thing you're like, okay, from now on we run tests using not just our cameras, but our lights, and to see if it has that flicker effect or not, and if it does, we change up something.
I can think of one really important thing. We should have given you the camera more, Paul, because so has anyone seen the kind of iconic photograph? I'm pretty sure that photo of me and Andrew is you shot it, right? Yeah. It's one of the best photographs that's ever been shot in animal rights history. And are there any artists in the room? Who's an artist? Raise your hand. Got a few. Art really, really matters. It really, really matters, because it's important to storytelling. It's important to making people feel your message is real. And there are certain people, and part of this is just practice. Like, Paul is an artist. He's not just a videographer. I wish you were mostly working with Jelly Split or VR camera, but like even the very brief amounts of time you had with the camera, like a good videographer will shoot like 100 or 1,000 times better footage than someone who's not good. And you've got to find great artists, and the same is true of a great poet, a great musician, a great graphic designer. Paul does great graphic design too. And I wish we had understood and appreciated that a little more back then, instead of just shooting whatever. Because the photos and videos we got out of the investigation, disproportionately, I think, were things you shot either with Jelly Squid or like that photograph you shot of me and Andrew. So, and this is another example of, if you have a skill, it's not even just art. Maybe it's programming. Maybe it's writing, although writing is a form of art. Maybe it's legislative work, like Curtis. Curtis has done a lot of amazing outreach with legislation and got a factory farm moratorium bill. I mean, amazing, unprecedented, remarkable that in the state of California, one of the biggest farm states in the nation, we nearly got the legislature to at least consider shutting down any future construction of any factory farms. Basically, the end of animal ag, the future of animal ag, at least is gone. So whatever your skill set is, there's a place for you in this movement. And I think in this investigation, I, as team lead, didn't identify the unique skill sets people had and invest in them as much as I should have. Because we should have had you behind the camera a little more, and me and John and other people a little less.
Thank you everybody for being here. Make sure you're sharing this live stream. Please go to righttorescue.com and sign the petition. You can go to dxe.io/Utah Trial to find out more information. Thank you guys so much for being here.
So Green asked, I think it's a more general outreach question, but like, what are some ways or techniques of winning people over that weren't necessarily involved economically or doesn't have any economic skin in the game with Smithfield and with the factory farm? Or even people who were involved.
Thanks. I don't know what the frequency of success is exactly, but the thing is, people who are in the system have a lot of gripes about the system to begin with. Maybe not the executives at WH Group or Smithfield or the billionaires who profit from it, but the actual farmers in a lot of cases. I'm not going to say that's comparable to what the victims who get their throats cut, but they are being exploited by these massive corporations just the same. They get involved and they sign contracts with Smithfield or Tyson or these other places, and then they are under extreme pressure to be among the top third or 50% of producers, quote unquote, in that network. And if they're not, they might lose everything. They have these mortgages and all these loans and all these costs. And the Smithfields of the world try to pass that on to them, pass a lot of the risk on to them. And if anything happens, if the birds get sick, if the pigs, if they get sick, it ends up costing the farmers themselves sometimes their entire lives and livelihoods. They lose a lot of control, they're under pressure. If there's any disagreement whatsoever, you've got this farmers legal team, which is probably non-existent, versus one of the top legal teams in the world. And it's a real disgusting power dynamic. So we start off with a lot of common ground, frankly. I can't say this enough. Like, when we are talking to people in general, I usually try to use like we and us language rather than you. Like, I really don't think we should be trying to focus a whole lot of blame and shame and guilt on individual consumers or even workers for sure, and even some of the owners of these farms, the individual farms, because we're all products of a system, and the system is so corrupt, and none of the people I just mentioned are the ones that really have all the power. So it's us. And when I say us, I mean farmers and workers and animals and everybody out there, consumers, people getting sick from eating animals. Like, we're all getting screwed over by the system that's in power. So we start with common ground. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I'll say two things to add to that. One is, when you look at the public responses, whether on social media or even in public comment to various legal proceedings involving Smithfield Foods in southern Utah, the most common complaint you see both on social media and in other public comments by local community members against Smithfield is probably the fact that it's owned by a Chinese government finance corporation, right? And there's definitely a race angle to this that we should be sensitive about. I'm Chinese myself. I certainly don't think we should blame Chinese people for this. But I do think it's relevant that one of the most abusive dictatorial governments in the world that terrorizes its own people is now owning a controlling stake in the American food system. And there have been two things that have come out recently that are very interesting that all of you should hear and know. Both of them, incidentally, have come out in somewhat conservative media, in the Wall Street Journal. Not in the New York Times, not in The Nation, not some liberal rag, but the Wall Street Journal. The first is that Smithfield Foods has been claiming they're shutting down their facilities in Utah and California to move to the Midwest, right? Because it's a Chinese-owned corporation. They certainly don't want Americans to think that we're basically outsourcing all the jobs to China where people are making $2,000 median income per year. That's one example of how it's not right to blame the Chinese, because when an entire country of people is making $2,000 per year, they're not doing so well. It's not really their fault. They're barely making ends meet. But there was an article in the Wall Street Journal just a few days ago showing that pig farms across the nation are shutting down. And one of the reasons is because Smithfield and all these big corporations are making massive investments in China, right? So this is a case where, because people in the United States are increasingly concerned about animal abuse, because they know when the factory farms are in the United States that animal abuse will be exposed, a way for them to keep this in the dark is to ship it to China, which is bad for the animals, because then, China is a country where it's almost impossible to do investigations. I've done one, I can tell you, it was terrifying. I got beaten up by dog meat trainers, charged with espionage, and in China, you cross the Chinese government, you just disappear. They don't have constitutional rights. There's no right to remain silent, for example. If they ask you, did you commit the crime? If you say no, they'll charge you for lying to them, even if you didn't commit the crime. Right? So when all of this factory farming is now moving to China, and we should know that, the people of Utah should know that this is not a corporation that has your interest at heart. It doesn't have the Chinese workers at heart either. The reason they're going to China is because the Chinese government doesn't give a damn about their people either. But the second thing that came out just a couple days ago, and I shared this in an editorial to you, is the Chinese government not only has been outsourcing massive amounts of production to its own country, away from farmers in Utah who are losing their jobs. They're blaming us. Really, it's Smithfield to blame. But the second thing is China has simultaneously been buying up massive amounts of agricultural land. Why would they do that? Why would they invest in a huge amount of expansion in China and also buy agricultural land in the United States? And one of the possible reasons is geopolitical, because they know if all the food is being produced in China and all the food in the United States that is being produced, increasingly smaller amount, is controlled by the Chinese government, then guess what? If there's a war over Taiwan, who is going to get blackmailed? It's not China. It's us. And it's not vegans. It's the entire country, the United States of America. Because you can't eat weapons. You can't eat nukes. You need food. And if we don't have food, we are going to lose.
We got time for one more quick one. Pete, I've already taken one from you. Does anybody else have a question? Wayne's got to go. We give him a round of applause before he takes off.
Please come to the panel. We're going to have a little discussion with the pig farmers and the grass to Trent. Should be very interesting, and you'll probably see some fireworks. So
Yeah, there's a panel at 3 with Wayne and Trent. Trent's a pig farmer, and they're going to have a debate or discussion.
If there's no questions.
Yeah, if there's no, sorry.
Yeah, if there's no more questions, and I'll stick around if anyone does have one, but honestly, go next door to the library, first floor on your right downstairs, the awesome air-conditioned auditorium.
Wayne's going to be talking with a farmer, and I want to live stream on that. So stick with us. I'm going to end this live stream and I'm going to pick up over there. I really urge everybody to stay and join the next live stream. I think it's going to be extremely interesting to hear Wayne talk with this farmer named Trent. You know, a lot of us don't know what's going on in the mind of some of these farmers. Here is your chance. Here's a chance to join in and see what they both have to say and how we can find that common ground. So thanks everybody, and I hope to see you soon.